Persuade and Convince, Master the Art of Influencing People. Introduction: The Invisible Power of Persuasion. Since the dawn of time, human beings have sought to influence others to achieve shared or personal goals. But before diving into the art of persuading and convincing, it's essential to understand the difference between persuading, convincing, and manipulating. Many people confuse these terms and, in doing so, lose sight of the true purpose of effective communication. To persuade is to invite another person to adopt an idea, take an action, or change a perspective, but from a place of respect and mutual understanding. It's about building a bridge between your vision and theirs so that they feel the decision is also their own. Convincing, on the other hand, focuses more on logically demonstrating why something is correct or beneficial. It is more rational, more argumentative, but equally valid. Manipulation, however, aims to achieve a result by exploiting weaknesses or deceiving, without regard for the other person's well-being. Here lies the key difference. Ethical persuasion is based on creating genuine, positive change, while manipulation sacrifices trust for an immediate and selfish gain. Imagine for a moment that a doctor recommends a patient to change their lifestyle. He could manipulate them using extreme fear. If you don't do this, you will die soon. Or he could persuade them from a place of understanding. I know changing habits is difficult, but I have a proposal that can help you live longer and better. Would you like to hear it? In both cases, the result might be similar. The patient may adopt new habits, but the emotional impact is radically different. Manipulation generates resistance and distrust. Genuine persuasion fosters collaboration and commitment. This is fundamental because we live in a world saturated with messages. If the other person perceives that you're trying to manipulate them, they will close off. But if they feel you seek a shared benefit, their mind and heart will open. That's why influencing is not the same as manipulating. To influence, in its noblest sense, is an act of leadership and service. Leadership, because every act of influence seeks to guide toward change or results. And service, because the goal of ethical influence is the common good, not just personal gain. Think of historical figures who changed the world not by imposing, but by inspiring. Martin Luther King didn't force people to march for equality. He inspired them with a dream so powerful that they wanted to be part of it. Nelson Mandela didn't win hearts through force, but through the example of reconciliation and forgiveness. Even in business, great leaders are not those who shout the loudest or threaten, but those who get others to join their vision willingly. Many people associate persuasion with aggressive sales or empty political speeches, and that's a mistake. Genuine persuasion is present in your daily life far more than you realize. When you convince a child to eat vegetables by explaining in a fun way why their body needs energy, you are persuading. When you get your work team to support a complex idea because you showed them how it will benefit their goals, you are persuading. Even when you ask a friend to join you somewhere they had no plans to visit, and they happily agree, you are persuading. In all these cases, there is no manipulation because there is no deception, only an exchange of value and understanding. If we look at human history, we see that the power of persuasion has been present since the first civilizations. Before writing existed, our ancestors told stories around the fire to pass down values, warnings, and survival strategies. These stories were tools of persuasion. They influenced group behavior without the use of physical force. With the arrival of writing and formal language, persuasion became even more sophisticated. The speeches of leaders like Pericles in ancient Greece, the works of philosophers such as Aristotle, who actually wrote an entire treatise on rhetoric and persuasion, laid the foundations for how language can inspire massive action. Think about the invention of the printing press. Suddenly, ideas once confined to small groups could travel the world. The Protestant Reformation didn't spread solely because of religious conviction, but also through the power of texts that persuaded millions to question old structures. Later on, speeches like Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address or Martin Luther King's iconic "I Have a Dream" showed that with the right words, you can change the course of history. Even scientific revolutions depended on persuasion. Galileo had to convince others that the Earth revolved around the sun, not only with solid arguments, but with language that challenged centuries of belief. What's fascinating is that this power hasn't disappeared. In fact, in the digital age, it's more present than ever. Today, every social media post, every viral video, every marketing campaign is designed to persuade us of something, to guide us toward an action. Buying, sharing, changing a thought, or following someone. That's why developing your ability to persuade is not an option. It's a necessity. It doesn't matter if you're an entrepreneur, a leader, a teacher, a parent, or simply someone who wants to improve their relationships. Persuading and influencing is the skill that can open more doors than any other. What we're going to explore in this audiobook is how to use this power ethically and effectively. This is not about manipulating, but about inspiring, about connecting with people so deeply that they themselves want to join your cause or adopt your vision. And this is an art, but an art that can be learned, practiced, and perfected. In the next few hours, we'll break down psychological principles, verbal and nonverbal communication strategies, advanced techniques, and practical examples you can apply in your daily life. By the end, you won't just know how to persuade and convince, but how to do it with authenticity, integrity, and a positive impact on people, and on your own future. Get ready, because this journey will not only change the way you communicate with others, but also the way you understand the power you have to influence the world around you. But before we continue, write in the comments which city you're listening from. And if this message is resonating with you, subscribe to the channel now. That way, you won't miss any content that nourishes your mind and brings you closer every day to the life you truly deserve. There's no time to waste. Now, let's continue. Chapter number 1. The Psychology of Human Influence. To understand how to persuade and convince effectively, we must first understand how the human mind works when receiving a persuasive message. Although we tend to think that we make decisions logically and rationally, science has shown that most of our decisions are deeply influenced by emotions and automatic processes. When someone receives a persuasive message, their brain does not act like an impartial judge coldly evaluating data. It acts like an emotional gatekeeper that decides whether to trust, whether to open up or shut down, whether to feel affinity or rejection. When a person hears a proposal, the first thing their brain evaluates is not whether the argument is solid, but whether the messenger is trustworthy. Over millions of years of evolution, the human brain develops survival mechanisms that make it react to signals of threat or safety before responding to pure logic. That's why, when it comes to persuasion, first impressions, tone of voice, body language, and perceived authenticity can weigh more than the arguments themselves. Think of an everyday example. If a stranger on the street approaches you with an aggressive tone asking to borrow money, your immediate reaction will be rejection, no matter how convincing their story might be. On the other hand, if a close friend, someone you have an emotional bond with, asks for help with a genuine and vulnerable tone, you're far more likely to listen with empathy. This brings us to a fundamental concept: emotions versus logic. The question many people ask is, what actually convinces, emotion or logic? The answer is that both are important, but not in the same proportion nor at the same stage of the decision-making process. Numerous neuroscience studies have shown that emotion is the initial spark that activates interest. A person can listen to a flawless logical argument, but if they don't feel an emotional connection, they are unlikely to act. For example, imagine someone offers you an investment plan. They give you precise data, projections, and statistics, and you listen. But if you don't feel trust in the person, or you don't perceive enthusiasm, you might dismiss the idea, even if, objectively, it's good. In contrast, if that person manages to evoke a positive emotion, trust, inspiration, enthusiasm, then your brain will be open to considering the rational data and taking action. A famous case in modern history illustrates this perfectly: the launch of the iPhone in 2007. Steve Jobs didn't limit himself to giving technical details about the device. In his famous speech, he didn't talk about how many megabytes it had or how many pixels were on the screen like a typical engineer might have done. Jobs stirred emotions by presenting the iPhone as a revolutionary device that will change the way you communicate with the world. The emotion of awe and desire opened the door, and the technical logic closed it, sealing the buying decision. This is how the mind works. First it feels, then it reasons. Here, cognitive biases also play a key role. Those mental shortcuts we use to make quick decisions without spending too much energy. These biases are a natural part of our mind, but they also explain why sometimes we accept ideas that aren't objectively the best, and why other times we reject things that actually are. For example, the authority bias makes people more likely to trust someone with a position of power or prestige. If a doctor in a white coat says something, most people will accept it more easily than if the same thing is said by someone without that symbol of authority, even if both have the same knowledge. Another is the social proof bias. We tend to follow what others are doing because our brain interprets that if many people are doing it, it's probably correct. This explains why testimonials, reviews, and popularity numbers are so powerful in modern persuasion. There are other common biases, such as scarcity. When we feel something is limited, our brain triggers an alarm that says, "You must act now, or you'll miss the opportunity." This isn't irrationality. It's survival instinct adapted to the modern world. Our brain evolved to react urgently to the possibility of loss. That's why campaigns that say, "last units available," or "offer valid only today," work so well. And it's not just in sales. Think about a social invitation. If someone says, "come to my house whenever you want," you might not take it too seriously. But if they say, "this Saturday is special, and I'd love for you to be there because it's only happening that day," your perception of importance increases. Another key bias is confirmation bias. We tend to accept information that confirms what we already believe, and automatically reject anything that contradicts our prior ideas. That's why persuading someone is not about bombarding them with data that clashes with their worldview. It's far more effective to connect your message with what that person already values or believes. For example, if someone values financial security, presenting a project as an opportunity for stable, protected growth will have more impact than talking only about potential gains. Understanding how the human mind works with these patterns doesn't mean we will manipulate them. It means we can communicate more strategically and humanely. Knowing that emotion opens the door and logic secures it gives us a powerful formula. First, connect with the person, with their emotions, values, and fears. Then, once their mind is open, present your logical arguments to give them certainty that they are making a good decision. Here's a practical example. Suppose you want to convince your team to implement new software in the company. You could directly present technical data, potential savings, and efficiency charts, but you'd likely face resistance because change brings discomfort. Instead, you could start by saying, "I know we all want to work with less stress and have more free time. This software can help us do that by freeing up hours from repetitive tasks so we can focus on what truly matters." Here, you connected with a positive emotion. Less stress, more time. Once that connection is made, then you present the concrete data about savings and efficiency. In short, persuasion is not a cheap trick. It's about understanding that the human mind is more emotional than rational, and that these biases are not flaws, they are survival mechanisms. Effective persuasion respects these mechanisms and uses them ethically, so that people not only accept an idea but also feel good about doing so. And that's the key. When someone feels they made the decision themselves, even if you influence them, persuasion becomes powerful and sustainable. Chapter number 2. Fundamental Principles of Persuading and Convincing. When we talk about persuasion, there are certain principles that have proven to be universal, applicable in virtually any context and culture. These principles are not mere tricks, but behaviors deeply rooted in human psychology that explain why people make certain decisions and why they tend to say yes in specific situations. Understanding and applying them ethically can completely transform the way you influence others, whether in a casual conversation, an important negotiation, or even when driving positive change in your environment. One of the most powerful principles is reciprocity. Since ancient times, humans have developed an innate sense of returning favors and maintaining social balance. If someone gives us something of value, we feel the need to reciprocate. This principle is so ingrained that even small acts of generosity can create a powerful inclination to return the favor. In a restaurant, for example, studies have shown that the simple act of a waiter giving a mint along with a check significantly increases tips. If, in addition, the waiter makes an extra gesture, such as giving a second mint while saying, "This is because you're a special customer," the tip increases even more. This happens because our brain feels it has received unexpected extra value and almost automatically seeks to balance that action. Applying reciprocity does not mean giving away expensive items, but creating experiences where the other person perceives that they received something valuable before being asked for anything in return. It could be useful information, a sincere compliment, a genuine act of help, or simply your time and quality attention. Another key principle is social proof. Human beings, in their need to belong and feel safe, tend to be guided by the behavior of others. When we see many people choosing an option, we tend to interpret it as a sign that it's the right choice. This principle explains why restaurants often display photos of famous people eating there, or why products with thousands of positive online reviews sell better. It's not that people lose their ability to decide, but that our brain looks for shortcuts to make safe decisions. And one very powerful shortcut is to observe what the majority is doing. For example, if you arrive in an unfamiliar city and look for a place to eat, where are you likely to go? Probably to the restaurant with a crowd at the door rather than the one that's empty, even if you know nothing about the food quality. This phenomenon can be used to your advantage by showing real testimonials, success stories, or simply evidence that others have already made the decision you're proposing and are satisfied with it. The third fundamental principle is authority. People tend to trust those they perceive as experts or leaders in a specific field. This isn't only about formal titles or hierarchical positions. Authority can be built by showing experience, knowledge, and confidence in what you communicate. Think of a doctor in a white coat or a lawyer with a portfolio of successful cases. The way we communicate visually and verbally can project authority without exaggerating credentials. In everyday life, anyone can establish authority through preparation and clarity in their messages. If you're going to present a project, simply anticipating questions, having concrete data, and expressing yourself with confidence automatically places you in a leadership position. The key is to use that authority ethically, not to impose, but to guide, because genuine authority inspires and educates instead of intimidating. Another principle that strongly influences human behavior is scarcity. The human brain is wired to place higher value on what it perceives as limited. If we believe something is available indefinitely or in unlimited quantity, our urgency to act decreases. Conversely, when something seems hard to get or is about to run out, our desire intensifies. This can be seen not only in commerce, with phrases like "last units available" or "offer valid only today," but also in relationships and life opportunities. For example, if a well-known mentor offers personalized coaching to only 5 people, those who want to learn from them will act quickly because they perceive the opportunity as unique. However, this principle must be applied responsibly. False scarcity can damage trust if people discover it was just a trick. The best way to use scarcity is when a genuine limitation exists, such as time, resources, or available slots, and to communicate it transparently. The fifth principle, and one of the most underestimated, is liking and human connection. People tend to say yes more easily to those they like, feel affinity with, or trust emotionally. This doesn't mean we should try to force everyone to like us, but rather that we should seek authenticity in our interactions. Being likable is not a superficial tactic. It's about creating genuine connection, showing real interest in others, practicing active listening, acknowledging achievements, finding common ground, and communicating warmly. Think about the difference between a salesperson who approaches you with a cold, direct, mechanical tone and one who starts the conversation by asking about your needs, smiling naturally, and sharing a bit of their personal experience to connect with you. The second is far more likely to elicit a positive response because their approach fosters affinity and lowers emotional barriers. The most fascinating thing about these 5 principles is that they don't work in isolation. They naturally intertwine in any persuasive interaction. For example, when someone perceives that you have authority on a subject, that you've offered them initial value, reciprocity, that others already trust you, social proof, that your proposal is limited in time or quantity, scarcity, and that you are a pleasant, easy-to-connect-with person, liking, the likelihood of reaching an agreement multiplies exponentially. Not because you've used manipulation techniques, but because you've aligned your communication with how the human mind and heart truly function. A clear example of integrating these principles can be seen in presenting new business projects. Imagine pitching an idea to investors. First, you offer initial value, such as a free market analysis they can use even if they don't invest, reciprocity. Then, you show examples of other companies or clients who have successfully adopted similar solutions, social proof. You highlight your team's experience and previous achievements, authority. You point out that the project has a window of opportunity open only for a specific period due to market conditions, scarcity. And, throughout the presentation, you maintain a genuine attitude, connecting with them as people and showing passion for the project, liking. That combination not only persuades, but also builds trust and enthusiasm, creating a win-win scenario. Applying these principles ethically not only makes you more persuasive but also more valuable to those around you. People trust those who act with integrity, and when you use reciprocity, social proof, authority, scarcity, and liking authentically, you build relationships based on respect and genuine cooperation. And that's the foundation of all lasting influence. That the other person doesn't feel obligated, they feel inspired. Chapter number 3. Verbal Communication. The Power of the Right Words. Verbal communication is the most direct vehicle of persuasion, and while it may seem like a natural process, The truth is that choosing the right words can be the difference between creating a positive impact or generating resistance. Every word carries emotional weight and meaning that go beyond its literal definition. The art of persuasion is not about speaking a lot or using sophisticated vocabulary. It's about finding the exact message that connects with both the mind and the heart of the other person. When we speak, we are not only transmitting information. We are also conveying emotions, intentions, and a vision of what we believe is possible. Choosing the exact message requires clarity about what you want to achieve and empathy toward the person receiving it. It's not enough to know what you want to say. You must also understand how the other person will interpret it. Imagine a team leader needs to communicate a change in strategy to their team members. They could do it in two ways. One option is to say, starting tomorrow, we will change our work system because the current one no longer works and we need something more efficient. The other option is, we're moving toward a work system that will allow us to achieve results with less effort and less stress, and I need everyone to be informed so we can do it in the best way possible. Both messages communicate the same fact, but they generate different emotions. The first may create resistance, as it sounds blunt and critical of previous work. The second inspires collaboration and openness because it emphasizes benefits for everyone. That is the essence of choosing the exact message, understanding that every word can build or destroy emotional bridges. One of the most powerful tools for delivering persuasive messages is storytelling, the art of telling stories. Stories have a unique power because they connect with the human brain at a deep emotional level. Since ancient times, people have learned, made decisions, and shared values through stories. A well-told story not only conveys information but also allows the listener to see themselves reflected in it, to feel emotions, and therefore to be motivated to act. For example, if you want to convince someone to adopt healthy habits, you could give them a list of medical benefits and statistical data. That might spark some interest, but it's unlikely to produce lasting change. However, if you tell the story of someone who transformed their life by changing their diet, who went from feeling tired and drained to regaining vitality and fully enjoying time with their family, you are activating the emotional part of the brain, which is what truly drives action. Storytelling has essential elements: a character, a conflict, and a resolution. The character can be you, another person, or even the listener. The conflict is the challenge they face, and the resolution is the transformation achieved by taking action or adopting an idea. When you use this format, your message becomes memorable. For example, if you want to convince a client to invest in your product, you could share a real case of a customer who faced a similar problem, explain how your product was the solution, and show the positive result. This creates an emotional bond that surpasses any isolated technical argument. Beyond stories, the way we structure language in general is also crucial. Here we see the difference between positive language and negative language. Positive language focuses on what can be achieved, on solutions and benefits. It generates a sense of possibility and openness. Negative language, on the other hand, focuses on what doesn't work, on problems, and on what should not be done, often creating a sense of limitation and resistance. For example, instead of saying, "Don't be late to the meeting," you could say, "It's important that we arrive on time so we can make the most of our meeting." The intended result is the same, but the emotional impact is different. The first sounds like a warning, the second like an invitation to collaborate. Even small language adjustments can create major changes in how a message is perceived. Saying, "You have to" sounds like an obligation, whereas "you can" or "I invite you to" creates a sense of choice and autonomy. In persuasion, this is vital because no one wants to feel forced. People want to feel they are making their own decisions. Another example from the world of sales. Instead of saying, "If you don't buy this product, you'll miss a great opportunity," it is more powerful to say, "With this product, you'll have the opportunity to improve your situation immediately." Both messages aim to highlight the value of taking action, but one does it through fear of loss, while the other does it through the possibility of gain, eliciting a more positive emotional response. The power of the right words also appears in how we ask questions. Open-ended questions invite reflection and dialogue, while closed questions can generate short answers and limit conversation. For example, in a negotiation, instead of asking, "Do you agree or not with this proposal?" you could ask, "Which aspects of this proposal do you find most valuable for your team?" The second question opens the door to understanding the other person's motivations and therefore adapting your message more effectively. Finally, we must never forget that verbal communication does not exist in isolation. It is complemented by tone of voice, rhythm, and the authenticity of the speaker. The right words lose power if they are not delivered with genuine intent. Effective persuasion requires consistency between what is said and how it is said. If your words are positive but your tone is aggressive, the other person will sense inconsistency. On the other hand, when words, tone, and body language are aligned, the message becomes a complete experience that makes a deep impact. That's why mastering the power of the right words is not just about vocabulary. It's about intention, empathy, and strategy. When you choose the exact message, use stories to connect emotionally, and adopt positive language that opens possibilities instead of closing them, you become someone capable of influencing in a constructive and authentic way. And that is the essence of persuasive verbal communication. Not to impose, but to invite. Not to force, but to inspire. Not to push, but to open the door so that the other person chooses to walk through it on their own. Chapter number 4. Nonverbal communication and body language. Nonverbal communication is the silent language we all understand without the need for words. Even before we learned to speak, we communicated through gestures, looks, and postures. This type of communication represents a large part of the impact of any message, because while words convey information, body language conveys intention and credibility. Our brains are wired to interpret nonverbal signals automatically, and in most cases, we believe more in what we see than in what we hear. That's why mastering nonverbal communication is not just about looking confident or pleasant, but about being consistent between what we say and what our body expresses. Posture is one of the most evident elements of body language. An upright posture, with relaxed shoulders and the head slightly raised, conveys confidence and openness. In contrast, a slouched posture, with shoulders leaning forward and the head down, can give the impression of insecurity or lack of interest. Think about how your perception changes when someone enters a room with a straight back and firm steps versus another person who enters with hesitant movements and eyes fixed on the floor. The first projects leadership and credibility, while the second may go unnoticed or generate distrust. Adopting an open posture, without crossing the arms defensively, creates a more receptive environment and shows that you are willing to listen and interact constructively. Gestures also play an important role in persuasion. Using your hands naturally and fluidly reinforces your words and helps convey clarity. For example, opening your palms upward while speaking can give the impression of honesty and transparency, while constantly pointing a finger can be interpreted as aggressive or domineering. It's not about memorizing a rigid set of gestures, but about developing awareness of how your movements support your message. A spontaneous gesture that arises from genuine emotion will always be more powerful than a rehearsed one without feeling. The key is to avoid repetitive or nervous movements, such as fiddling with a pen or constantly crossing and uncrossing your legs, as these can distract your listener and convey anxiety. Facial expressions are another essential component. Our faces can convey emotions in fractions of a second, and the recipient of our message perceives them even unconsciously. A genuine smile, for instance, can immediately create an atmosphere of trust, while a tense expression can shut down communication before it even starts. The key is congruence. If you say, "I'm happy to be here," but your face looks serious or tired, the message loses strength. Conversely, a facial expression aligned with your words generates a positive impact and strengthens emotional connection with the other person. It's important to remember that micro-expressions, those quick, almost imperceptible facial reactions, can reveal real emotions, so working on emotional self-regulation is also part of nonverbal communication. Eye contact has a special power in persuasion. Appropriate eye contact conveys confidence, interest, and respect. When you look someone in the eye while speaking, you send the message that you value the interaction and have nothing to hide. However, too much or too little eye contact can cause discomfort. Holding a gaze without blinking may seem intimidating, while avoiding it altogether may be interpreted as a lack of confidence or sincerity. The balance lies in maintaining a natural gaze, accompanied by gestures that indicate active listening, such as gently nodding when the other person speaks or slightly raising your eyebrows to show attention and interest. In addition, the use of personal space influences how our body language is perceived. Approaching someone too quickly can invade their space and create discomfort, while staying too far away can give the impression of coldness or disinterest. Learning to gauge the right distance according to the situation and your relationship with the person is key to building trust. For example, in a close conversation with a trusted colleague, a distance of less than 1 meter may be appropriate, but in a first meeting with a client, maintaining some initial space shows respect and professionalism. Nonverbal communication also includes the rhythm of movements and the overall energy of the body. Moving too quickly can convey nervousness, while a calm and controlled pace reflects confidence and mastery of the situation. That's why, when you want to persuade, think about the energy you transmit with your whole body. Does your posture invite dialogue? Do your gestures reinforce your message or contradict it? Does your facial expression reflect what you truly feel? These questions will help you become aware and improve your ability to communicate without words. To build confidence through nonverbal communication, the first step is coherence. It's not enough to adopt a power pose if you feel insecure inside. People can sense authenticity, or the lack of it. That's why working on self-confidence is essential, because body language is a reflection of your internal state. A useful technique is to consciously practice an open posture before important situations. Taking a moment beforehand to relax, breathe deeply, and align your body into a position of openness and firmness can generate an internal sense of security that naturally projects outward. Another key aspect is observation and adaptation. When talking to someone, observe their body language and adjust yours to create rapport, a phenomenon known as mirroring. If the person speaks with a calm tone and gentle gestures, subtly reflecting that style can create a sense of connection and trust. This process should be done with subtlety and naturalness, not mechanically, since the goal is not to imitate, but to harmonize. Nonverbal communication is not an optional supplement to words. It is the framework in which those words are interpreted. You may have the best message in the world, but if your posture, gestures, and facial expressions don't support it, it will lose strength. On the other hand, when your body language communicates openness, confidence, and consistency with what you say, your persuasive power multiplies. Ultimately, learning to manage your nonverbal communication is an investment in your credibility and your ability to build trust. Two essential elements for positively influencing any area of life. Chapter number 5. The Power of Voice and Intonation. The voice is one of the most powerful tools for influencing others. Unlike written words, the voice conveys emotions, moods, and confidence. Even a perfectly crafted message can lose impact if delivered with an inappropriate tone or a flat intonation. That's why those who wish to persuade must learn to consciously modulate their voice, turning it into an instrument capable of projecting authority when firmness is needed, and empathy when the goal is to connect emotionally. A voice with authority doesn't mean a loud or dominant voice. It means a voice that projects security and conviction. Imagine two people saying exactly the same phrase, "I'm confident this project will succeed." One says it with a weak, monotone delivery, while the other uses a firm tone with a downward intonation at the end, conveying certainty. Although the words are identical, the second person inspires more trust because their voice conveys leadership. On the other hand, when the goal is to create closeness and empathy, the voice should soften, lowering the volume slightly, using a warm tone, and adopting a slower pace. A leader who always speaks with authority may seem distant. One who knows when to soften their voice strikes a balance that inspires both respect and trust. Vocal modulation is key in persuasion because every situation requires a different nuance. For example, during a high-impact presentation, you might start with an energetic tone to grab attention, then shift to a calmer tone when explaining important details, and finally close with an upbeat, enthusiastic tone that inspires action. This variation avoids monotony and keeps the listener engaged. Vocal monotony is the natural enemy of persuasion because without emotional contrast, the message feels flat and loses strength. The rhythm of the voice also plays a crucial role. Speaking too fast can signal nervousness or anxiety, while speaking too slowly can bore the audience and cause them to lose interest. The goal is to find a balanced pace, one that allows the listener to process the message without feeling like it's dragging. This is where the strategic use of pauses comes in. A well-placed pause can enhance the power of a message more than any other technique. For example, saying, "This decision will change. Everything you thought was possible." The pause after "will change" creates anticipation, prompting the listener to pay closer attention. Silences also have a strategic role. Not every space in a conversation needs to be filled with words. Pauses allow the listener to reflect on what has just been said and create a natural emphasis. A skilled communicator knows that staying silent at the right moment can be more persuasive than continuing to speak. For example, when making a proposal, saying confidently, "This is the right path to achieve the results we need," and then remaining silent forces the other person to process the idea and, in many cases, respond from a place of reflection rather than automatic reaction. The timbre of the voice also communicates emotions. A high-pitched, tense voice can convey anxiety, while a deeper, steady voice communicates confidence and calm. The goal is not to change your natural voice, but to train it to eliminate tension and project the right emotional state for each situation. One effective exercise is practicing diaphragmatic breathing, which allows you to speak in a deeper, more sustained tone, preventing your voice from breaking under pressure. Professional speakers dedicate time to such exercises because they know that by controlling their breathing, they control their vocal stability, and with it, the perception they create in others. The voice is also a leadership tool. A leader who knows how to use it can inspire confidence in their team, even during challenging times. Imagine a scenario where the company is facing a crisis. A leader speaking with a shaky tone can create more uncertainty than already exists. In contrast, a leader who maintains a steady tone, communicates calm, and emphasizes a strong vision for the future with conviction can motivate the team to remain focused and positive. That's why the voice doesn't just communicate information. It regulates the emotional state of the group listening. There are situations where vocal empathy is essential for persuasion. For example, when delivering difficult feedback. Instead of saying coldly, "This result is unacceptable, and you need to improve," you could use a warm, measured tone to say, "I appreciate the effort you put into this, and I believe that with a few adjustments we can achieve a much better outcome." The content is still constructive criticism, but the tone creates openness instead of resistance. Another crucial element is the alignment between voice and content. If you say positive words with a tired or lifeless tone, the message loses impact. Conversely, an enthusiastic tone can amplify the effect of even a simple message. This is why great communicators focus not only on what they say, but on how their voice sounds when saying it. They practice reading aloud, record their presentations, and listen to their intonation to spot areas for improvement. The power of the voice isn't limited to speeches or presentations. It also influences everyday conversations. Whether asking an important question, offering advice, or proposing an idea, the voice determines whether the message inspires trust, empathy, or, on the contrary, creates distance. That's why those who want to master the art of persuasion must treat their voice as a professional tool and invest time in developing it, just as a musician tunes their instrument before performing. When you can modulate your voice, use strategic pauses, and project both authority and empathy, your ability to influence increases exponentially. Words carry the content, but the voice carries the emotion, and it's emotion that moves people to act. In short, the voice is a bridge between what we think and what others perceive. When that bridge is solid, persuasion flows naturally and powerfully. Chapter number 6. The Art of Listening and Reading Others. Persuasion is not about talking a lot, using the most beautiful words, or even mastering voice techniques or body language, although all of that helps. True influence begins with a quieter yet infinitely more powerful skill: the ability to listen deeply and read what the other person truly needs. When done well, listening is not a passive action. It is an active act of giving, of full attention, and of complete empathy. It means stopping the urge to think about what you want to say and instead focusing on understanding what the other person feels, thinks, and needs in that moment. It's a subtle dance in which silence becomes a tool for connection, and listening becomes the gateway to the other person's heart and mind. That is precisely where real persuasion begins. Active listening is much more than hearing someone's words. It means being fully present with all your senses, without interrupting, without judging, and without mentally rehearsing your response while the other person is speaking. It involves paying close attention, nodding naturally, pausing before answering, rephrasing what you've understood, and asking from genuine curiosity, not from strategy. For example, when someone expresses frustration with their team, it's not enough to say, "I understand." It's far more powerful to say, "It sounds like you felt your ideas weren't valued. Is that what bothered you most?" This level of listening not only demonstrates empathy but makes the other person feel deeply understood. And when someone feels understood, their defenses drop, and they open up emotionally, making them far more receptive to new ideas, proposals, or changes. Often, what people say is not exactly what they feel or need. Behind every complaint, criticism, or doubt, there's usually an unspoken desire or emotional need. This is why identifying hidden needs is one of the most valuable skills for anyone who wants to influence without manipulating. For example, if a client says, "Your product is too expensive," the real concern might not be the price, but the fear of making a mistake or appearing irresponsible in front of their team. If an employee says, "I'm not sure about this new plan," deep down they may feel their opinion wasn't considered and need to feel included. Those who learn to read between the lines, listening with the heart more than the ears, can discover what truly moves people and connect to that point with sensitivity. A powerful technique for reading someone's internal language is to observe their eye movements during conversation. While it's not an exact science, there are patterns that reveal how a person is processing information. For example, looking up to their left may indicate they're recalling visual memories. Looking up to their right may suggest they're constructing new images, imagining scenarios. Looking sideways may mean they're recalling sounds. Looking down, especially to their left, may show they're accessing internal dialogue. This allows you to adapt your message to the person's preferred processing channel. If you notice someone thinks in images, you can use visual phrases like, "Imagine this," or "Picture how it would be if." If they seem sound-oriented, you might say, "Listen to this," or "How does this idea sound to you?" Such subtle adaptation greatly improves connection and mutual understanding. The emotional tone of a person's voice also offers clues about their internal state. A trembling voice, even with strong words, reveals insecurity or contained emotion. A faster-than-usual pace may signal anxiety, urgency, or excitement. Learning to detect these nuances gives you a silent but powerful advantage. You can adjust your message not just to the content, but to the emotion the other person is experiencing. For instance, if you sense fear in someone who says, "I'm fine," don't take it literally. You could respond with, "I can tell there might be something else on your mind. I'm here to listen if you'd like to share." This breaks through the surface layer of language and opens the door to a more authentic conversation. Another essential tool for reading others is observing micro-expressions and subtle changes in facial expression. A slight eyebrow raise, a forced smile, a rapid blink, or a small gesture of discomfort with the hands can tell you more than a whole speech. For example, if someone says they agree but their body pulls back or their gaze shifts away, there's likely an unspoken doubt or objection. In such cases, the wisest approach is not to push but to create a safe space with gentle questions. Is there something that doesn't fully convince you? Or, which aspect makes you feel unsure? The key is not to confront but to invite the other person to share their truth without feeling judged or pressured. Deep empathy is not a persuasion technique, it's an inner attitude. It means putting yourself in the other person's shoes without losing your own center. It's not about agreeing with everything but understanding where the other person is coming from. A persuasive communicator doesn't aim to impose their view, but to build bridges where there were once walls. Listening with empathy transforms the dynamic of any conversation because it shifts the focus from me to us. And when someone feels their experience is valid and their perspective respected, they naturally open up to listening as well. One of the biggest mistakes in persuasion is speaking too soon. If you haven't listened enough, your proposals will sound out of context or disconnected from the other person's reality. But when you've listened attentively and read the other person with sensitivity, you can offer a message that not only makes sense but resonates with what they need at that very moment. Instead of pushing an idea, you invite it to emerge from within them. That's what truly transforms, not the words imposed from outside, but the ideas born inside the listener. The art of reading others also involves understanding patterns of behavior and personality. Some people need to feel safe before accepting something new. Others thrive on the excitement of the moment. Some value logic and data. Others need emotional connection. The more you practice empathetic observation, the faster you'll identify these profiles and adapt your communication accordingly. Not to manipulate, but to create an experience that feels aligned with their worldview. Finally, remember that listening to and reading others are not skills you master overnight. They are practices refined through the consistent intention to connect from an honest place. It requires patience, humility, and presence. But those who cultivate this ability become not only more persuasive but also more human, trustworthy, and inspiring. And in the end, that's what truly remains. Not just what you said, but how you made the other person feel when they were in your presence. Chapter number 7. Advanced Persuasion Strategies. At this point, We have already explored the psychological foundations of persuasion, the power of verbal and nonverbal language, and the importance of listening and reading others. Now it's time to take a deeper step into advanced strategies that can make a significant difference in your ability to influence. These techniques require sensitivity, practice, and a clear intention to generate value and well-being for those around you, because only from that integrity can genuine and sustainable persuasive power be achieved. One such strategy is emotional anchoring, a principle that comes from neurolinguistic programming and behavioral psychology. Anchoring consists of associating a specific stimulus, a word, a gesture, an image, an object, with a specific emotional state, so that when the stimulus is repeated, the emotion is reactivated. Why is it so powerful? Because most human decisions are not made from pure logic, but from an emotional state. For example, advertisers constantly use it when they associate a product with feelings of success, freedom, or happiness. Each time we see that product, the brain recalls the associated emotion. In the personal sphere, you can create positive emotional anchors in your conversations. Imagine that during an important conversation with a client, you manage to get them to recall a moment of success in their life and associate that memory with the idea of working with you. Every time they think of you, they will automatically feel a part of that positive emotion. Emotional anchoring must be used carefully and honestly, because its power can be enormous. To apply it ethically, it's recommended to focus on emotional states that genuinely benefit the other person, such as motivation, clarity, or confidence. For example, if you want to motivate your team before a challenging project, you could invite them to recall a moment when they successfully overcame a difficult situation and then link that experience to the current challenge. Remember last year when it seemed impossible to reach that goal, and we achieved it through teamwork. This new challenge is another opportunity to do it together. That emotional connection not only inspires, but also anchors a sense of capability and unity. Another advanced strategy is the use of powerful metaphors and examples. Metaphors are like shortcuts to deep understanding because they transform complex ideas into easy-to-remember images. The human brain processes images much better than abstractions. That's why a metaphor can open cognitive doors that a logical explanation could never achieve. For example, if you want to explain to your team why it's important to adapt to change, you could use the river metaphor. Change is like a river. If you try to stop it with your hands, it will sweep you away. If you learn to swim with the current, it will take you to new places. This image creates a much greater emotional and cognitive impact than simply saying, we must be flexible in the face of change. Metaphors also help to disarm resistance. When someone feels attacked by an idea, a metaphor can provide an alternative path to understanding the message without feeling directly confronted. For example, instead of saying, your way of working is outdated, you could say, it's like we're using an old map in a world whose roads have changed. We need a new map to get there faster. The metaphor avoids personal criticism but still conveys the need for change. Concrete examples serve a similar function. People are not always moved by theory, but by tangible evidence of how an idea works in practice. That's why, when presenting an argument, it's always helpful to back it up with a real story or success case. For example, if you're persuading someone to adopt a new management system, telling how another similar company implemented it and succeeded in reducing costs and increasing employee satisfaction can be far more convincing than simply talking about technical features. Generating commitment and immediate action is another key aspect of advanced persuasion. Many times, people agree with an idea but don't act because inertia is stronger than intention. To break that barrier, you need to create a clear emotional connection and an immediate step, however small. A powerful principle here is the progressive yes. Instead of asking for a big commitment all at once, seek a series of small yes that naturally lead to the desired outcome. For example, if you want someone to participate in a large project, first ask for something small. Could you give me your opinion on this specific point? Once they participate, they're more likely to commit to the rest. Another effective technique for generating immediate action is using what's known as purposeful open door. Asking a question that leads the other person to visualize themselves taking action. For example, if we started this project today, what would be the first step you'd take? This question gets the person's mind to picture themselves already in motion, increasing the likelihood that they'll actually act. And if you follow this with a clear and enthusiastic close, such as, perfect, then let's do it that way, you build momentum toward action. It's also useful to set a clear time frame. People tend to procrastinate when there's no deadline. If a change or agreement is proposed without a defined frame, it will most likely remain up in the air. Instead, saying, "Let's do this within the next 3 days," or "We can move forward with the first phase this week," creates a sense of positive urgency. Of course, this must be realistic and flexible, but having a time horizon helps turn intention into concrete behavior. All these strategies, emotional anchoring, the use of powerful metaphors and examples, and generating immediate commitment, have one thing in common. They appeal to both the mind and the heart of the listener. This is not about manipulation, but about guiding with clarity and empathy. Persuasion is not about forcing, but about opening internal doors. Not about imposing, but about inviting to act. Not about convincing through pressure, but about inspiring through meaning. Those who master these techniques understand that persuasion doesn't just happen in the moment of speaking, but in how the emotional ground is prepared, how memorable mental images are built, and how clear paths toward action are designed. With practice, these tools cease to be isolated techniques and become a natural, honest, and deeply effective communication style. Chapter number 8. Persuading with Ethics and Values. Talking about persuasion without talking about ethics is like building a skyscraper without a foundation. Sooner or later, it will collapse. Many people confuse persuading with manipulating, and that confusion has created a distorted image of the act of influencing. Persuasion is not about deceiving, nor about imposing your own will regardless of the consequences. Persuading ethically means generating authentic agreements where both parties win, where the final result not only solves an immediate problem but also strengthens the long-term relationship. The fundamental difference between manipulating and persuading lies in intention. The manipulator seeks to control and take advantage of the other person without caring whether it benefits them, while the ethical persuader seeks a result that serves the other person, generates a positive impact, and is built on mutual trust. Let's imagine two scenarios. In the first, a salesperson exaggerates the features of their product, omits its limitations, and pressures the client to close the deal quickly, knowing the product may not be the best option for them. That is manipulation. In the second scenario, a salesperson listens attentively to the client's needs, honestly presents what the product can and cannot do, and if they realize it is not the best choice, even recommends another alternative. That is ethical persuasion. In the first case, the manipulator may close the sale but will lose the relationship in the long run and damage their reputation. In the second case, they may not close the immediate sale, but they will have gained something much more valuable: the client's trust, who will likely return when they truly need what is being offered or recommend them to others because they perceive them as someone with integrity. Transparency and honesty are at the core of value-based persuasion. People can quickly sense when someone is hiding information, exaggerating, or using half-truths to gain an advantage. While such techniques may seem effective at first, over time they breed distrust, and distrust is the greatest enemy of any relationship, whether professional, commercial, or personal. On the other hand, when a person is transparent, clearly explaining their intentions, communicating the risks along with the benefits, acknowledging what they don't know or cannot guarantee, they create fertile ground for the other party to make decisions from a place of security and respect. This transparency does not show weakness. On the contrary, it shows maturity and a genuine commitment to the other person's well-being. A clear example can be found in leadership. A leader might choose to manipulate by hiding uncomfortable information or using fear to align the team. They may achieve short-term obedience, but at a huge cost: a demotivated team, without trust, and with high turnover. Conversely, a leader who explains the situation honestly, acknowledges the challenges, and at the same time shares a clear, achievable vision generates genuine commitment. This honesty creates an emotional bond that goes beyond the job title. The team feels part of something greater because they perceive their leader as someone who means what they say and says what they mean. Ethics in persuasion also means respecting the other person's freedom. True influence does not aim to force a decision, but to offer information and options that allow the other person to choose of their own free will. A classic example is marketing campaigns that drive impulse purchases through fear, such as, "Buy now or lose this opportunity forever." While these tactics work, they do so by appealing to the consumer's pressure and anxiety, often leading to later regret. An ethical alternative is to present the real benefits of the product, demonstrate its value, and let the customer decide without undue pressure. Interestingly, when people feel they have the freedom to choose, they tend to trust the one who presented the option more, and often end up deciding in their favor because they perceive respect and authenticity. Building long-term relationships based on trust is perhaps the greatest benefit of persuading ethically. When the other person feels that you are not only interested in closing a deal, winning a debate, or achieving an immediate change, but that you care about their well-being and their future, they open themselves to a deeper connection. That relationship can become a source of opportunities, recommendations, and sustained collaboration over time. It's like planting a tree instead of selling a piece of fruit. The fruit may be consumed quickly, but the tree will bear fruit for years. An example of this can be seen in family businesses that have thrived for generations. Many of these companies retain customers for decades not because they offer the lowest price or the most innovative product, but because they have built a reputation for honesty and an ethical commitment passed on by word of mouth. In a world saturated with offers and all kinds of messages, trust has become a scarce and extremely valuable resource. And those who persuade ethically, building relationships instead of transactions, immediately stand out. Even in difficult situations, such as negotiating conflicts or making tough decisions, ethics can be a differentiator. A mediator, for example, might try to manipulate the parties into yielding quickly to reach a superficial agreement, but that rarely solves the root problem. Conversely, a mediator who truly listens, is transparent about their intentions, and seeks a fair outcome for all may take a little longer to reach consensus, but that consensus will be stronger and longer lasting. Ethics is not a brake on persuasion, it's a long-term accelerator. It may require more effort, more listening, and more clarity at the beginning, but the result is healthier, more productive relationships that are more resilient in times of crisis. And in a world where distrust is commonplace, that becomes a tremendous competitive advantage. In short, persuading with ethics and values means committing to something bigger than an immediate result. It's about understanding that every interaction leaves an emotional footprint on the other person, and that footprint can become either an open door or a barrier that never falls. When your influence is based on transparency, honesty, and respect for the other person's freedom, you not only achieve your objectives, but you also help others achieve theirs. And that is the kind of persuasion that lasts, inspires, and transforms realities. Chapter number 9. Persuasion in different scenarios. Persuasion does not manifest the same way in every context. The way you persuade a work team is not the same as how you influence your family, your partner, or in a digital environment. Each scenario has its own dynamics, prevailing emotions, and different motivations, but the essential principle remains the same. Effective persuasion always seeks to create a genuine agreement that benefits both parties. Understanding how to adapt your communication to each environment is what allows you to become a well-rounded influencer, someone capable of generating positive change no matter where they are. In the professional sphere, persuasion is the foundation of areas such as sales, leadership, and negotiation. In sales, persuasion is not about convincing someone to buy something they don't need, but about helping them make an informed decision that improves their life or business. The best salespeople don't just talk about features, they focus on benefits. They don't aim to close quickly, but to build lasting relationships. For example, an ethical salesperson doesn't pressure a client by saying, "If you don't buy today, you'll miss your chance." Instead, they focus on understanding their real needs. Tell me what problem you're trying to solve with this product. That genuine listening opens the door for the proposal to align with the customer's true desire, increasing not only the likelihood of a sale but also of a long-term relationship. In leadership, persuasion is synonymous with inspiration. A leader cannot rely on fear or hierarchical authority as their main source of influence, because that only generates temporary obedience and silent resentment. True persuasion in leadership comes from having a clear vision, a shared purpose, and the ability to emotionally connect with a team. For example, a leader who wants to implement a major change in the company shouldn't simply say, "This is what we're going to do." Instead, they can explain the reasoning behind the decision, show how it will benefit each member, and create spaces for everyone to express doubts and concerns. This approach fosters a sense of belonging and genuine commitment, because the team does not feel forced, but rather involved in building the solution. In negotiation, persuasion is even more evident. A negotiation is not a battlefield where one wins and the other loses. It is an exploration process where both parties seek to satisfy their interests. The best negotiators know how to listen attentively, identify the other party's hidden needs, and find points of convergence that lead to a sustainable agreement. For example, instead of focusing solely on price, a persuasive negotiator can explore other factors such as timelines, guarantees, or additional benefits that satisfy both parties. This not only closes the deal but also creates a relationship that can generate future opportunities. In personal relationships, persuasion takes a different form, as it involves the emotional weight of family, partners, or friends. Here, the goal is not to close a sale or achieve a corporate objective, but to maintain harmony, resolve conflicts, and strengthen emotional bonds. Persuading a child to adopt a healthy habit, for example, is not achieved through shouting or threats, but with empathy and example. Saying, "You have to exercise because I said so," rarely works. Showing through actions the benefits of an active lifestyle, sharing activities, and explaining why it will make them feel better, that has an impact. In a relationship, persuasion does not mean manipulating the other person to do what you want, but expressing your needs clearly, listening to theirs, and finding common ground. For example, instead of saying, "You never pay attention to me, you need to change," you might say, "I'd love for us to spend more time together because it makes me feel connected to you. How about we set aside one night a week just for us?" This kind of persuasive communication strengthens the bond because it seeks agreements from a place of love and respect, not imposition. In friendship, persuasion is about influencing positively without losing authenticity. A good friend doesn't manipulate, but can help another make better decisions. For instance, if someone is considering abandoning an important project out of fear, you could support them with, "I remember how excited you were about this idea at the start. What's changed? How can we face that fear together?" That genuine support, rather than pressuring, inspires the other person to reconsider their decisions from a renewed emotional perspective. The social and digital environment is an entirely different setting. Social media, virtual spaces, and digital media have transformed how we persuade, as it now involves influencing larger, more diverse audiences at the same time. In this space, content is the most powerful persuasion tool. A persuasive message on social media must be clear, emotional, and authentic, because digital audiences can easily detect what is fake or forced. For example, instead of using generic messages like, "Our product is the best," it's more effective to share a real story of how a customer improved their life thanks to the product, accompanied by images or videos that connect emotionally with the viewer. Transparency is especially important in the digital realm, as social media users are increasingly critical and have access to multiple information sources. If they sense a brand is exaggerating or manipulating, the negative response can go viral within hours. That's why those who seek to influence in virtual environments should focus on building trust through useful content, real testimonials, honest interaction, and a brand image consistent with their values. Moreover, the digital environment has a unique characteristic: two-way interaction. It's no longer about sending out a one-way message like a TV commercial. Now the audience responds, shares opinions, and participates. This means digital persuasion also relies on the ability to actively listen to followers, answer their questions, thank them for their comments, and build a community. It's not just about selling or convincing. It's about creating a space for conversation where people feel valued. In summary, persuasion takes on different nuances depending on the context. In the professional field, it aims for tangible results. In personal relationships, it seeks harmony and emotional connection. And in the digital environment, it aims to build trust and credibility with broader audiences. But in all these scenarios, the fundamental principles remain the same. Listen attentively, communicate clearly, and act with integrity. Those who master these principles and adapt them to each situation become capable of generating positive change in any area of life, building stronger relationships, achieving more consistent results, and creating a deeper impact. Chapter number 10. Common mistakes you must avoid. In the process of persuading, one of the biggest obstacles is not the lack of advanced techniques, but the presence of basic mistakes that sabotage the outcome before the conversation even progresses. These mistakes not only make it harder to reach an agreement, but they can also damage valuable relationships and close the door to future opportunities. Avoiding them doesn't require being an expert. It simply requires being aware of them and developing the discipline to adjust our communication with intention and respect. One of the most frequent mistakes is forcing the conversation. This happens when we try to impose a point of view or rush a decision without considering the other person's emotional and mental pace. Forcing a conversation generates automatic resistance because people deeply value their freedom of choice. Imagine a salesperson who, instead of listening, pressures with phrases like, "You must decide right now, there's no other option." They might secure an agreement through momentary pressure, but the client will feel manipulated and, over time, will avoid doing business with them again. The same thing happens in personal environments. If someone insists over and over that their partner adopt a habit without considering their reasons or emotions, they're not persuading. They're creating a conflict that can erode the relationship. True persuasion is not about pushing. It's about opening doors so the other person chooses to walk through them willingly. Another common mistake is talking too much and listening too little. Many people believe persuasion is a constant act of speaking, that the more they talk and the more arguments they give, the more likely they are to convince. In reality, it's the opposite. The person who talks the most may seem confident, but if they don't actively listen to the other person, they miss the key information needed to adapt their message to real needs. For example, in a negotiation, someone who insists on listing all their benefits without asking what matters to the other side may miss the opportunity to reach a much better agreement. A persuasive communicator listens first, asks questions, understands the context, and then speaks briefly but precisely. A useful rule is the 70-30 principle. Listen 70% of the time and speak 30%. This not only allows you to gather more information but also makes the other person feel valued and understood, opening the door to a more genuine connection. Underestimating the power of first impressions is another critical mistake. First impressions are formed within the first few seconds of interaction, and while they can be changed over time, they often set an emotional starting point that's hard to reverse. A sloppy appearance, a cold tone of voice, closed body language, or a rushed greeting can create an immediate negative perception. This doesn't mean we should obsess over appearing perfect, but it is essential to take care of small initial details. A firm handshake, or the culturally appropriate equivalent, natural eye contact, a sincere smile, and starting the conversation by showing genuine interest in the other person. For example, beginning a meeting with, "Thank you for taking the time to be here. I really value your opinion on this matter," creates an atmosphere of respect and openness from the start. Another aspect related to first impressions is consistency between what we say and what we show. If someone talks about trust but avoids eye contact, or claims to be excited but speaks in a monotone, the message loses power because the other person's brain detects an inconsistency. That's why aligning verbal and nonverbal language is not just a technical detail. It's a central element for generating credibility from the very beginning. It's also important to avoid the mistake of overloading the other person with excessive information. Often, in an attempt to be convincing, we flood them with data, statistics, stories, and examples that, instead of persuading, confuse and exhaust. The key is to select the information that truly matters in the context of the conversation. Always ask yourself, what is most relevant to this person at this moment? If you can identify that answer, you'll be able to communicate clearly and make an impact without giving endless speeches. Another frequent mistake is failing to adapt your communication style to your audience. Some people prefer technical details, others respond to emotional clarity, and others need a practical vision of the immediate benefits. Using a one-size-fits-all approach is a common failure that limits results. For example, presenting a project to a results-oriented executive requires a message focused on metrics and strategic benefits, while explaining it to an operational team may require a more human and visual approach, showing how it will affect their day-to-day work. Adapting doesn't mean changing your essence. It means tuning into the way the other person processes information, which shows respect and strengthens connection. Finally, another frequent mistake is forgetting the follow-up. Many people think persuasion ends when the conversation does, but in reality, the relationship continues. Failing to follow up after a meeting, a sale, or an important conversation can create the impression of disinterest or lack of commitment. On the other hand, a simple follow-up message such as, "Thank you for today's conversation. I enjoyed hearing your ideas and I look forward to moving forward soon," can solidify a good impression and keep the relationship open. Avoiding these mistakes doesn't require extraordinary skills, just awareness and consistent practice. Persuasion is not about speaking louder or always having the last word. It's about listening attentively, taking care of every detail in the initial encounter, and respecting the other person's pace. When you eliminate these basic errors from your communication, your ability to influence improves significantly, because people feel heard, respected, and free to choose, which is the foundation of all authentic and lasting persuasion. Chapter number 11. Case Study. The Fable of Boreas and Helios. The Fable of Boreas and Helios, better known as that of the North Wind and the Sun, is one of the most powerful yet simple stories about the art of persuasion. In the original version, Boreas, the North Wind, and Helios, the Sun, argued over who was more powerful. To settle the matter, they decided to compete. See who could make a traveler remove his coat. Boreas blew with all his strength, producing intense gusts of wind. However, the harder he blew, the more tightly the traveler clung to his coat, pressing it against his body to protect himself from the cold. Then Helios took his turn. Instead of using force, he simply shone with warmth and gentleness. The traveler, feeling comfortable and safe, voluntarily removed his coat. This story carries a fundamental lesson. Gentle persuasion, based on warmth and empathy, is far more effective than pressure or force. So, how do we apply this fable in modern life? In a fast-paced world, full of external pressures, most people are used to feeling attacked or forced by messages, aggressive sales tactics, tense arguments, and rushed decisions. When someone tries to blow like the wind, the natural reaction is for the other person to close off, protect themselves, and resist. In contrast, when we adopt Helios' approach, we create an environment of trust and openness that allows the other person to act of their own free will, not through imposition. Let's think about a work context. Imagine you are the leader of a team and you need them to adopt a new digital system that will change the way they work. A Boreas-style approach would be, this is mandatory. You must learn it and start using it tomorrow, no excuses. Some may comply, but others will develop resistance, fear, or even resentment toward the change. Now, a Helios-style approach would be to explain the benefits of the system, show how it will reduce workload, give real examples of other teams already achieving positive results, and offer support during the transition. When the team feels understood and supported, they will adopt the change with a much more positive attitude. There was no force, only clarity and support, and the end result will be stronger. The same happens in personal relationships. Many arguments between couples, friends, or family resemble the north wind. Both sides try to blow harder with arguments, raise their voices, or repeat their points to exhaustion. However, rarely does anyone change their mind because they were pressured. On the contrary, that approach creates a defensive stance, where the person clings to their emotional coat even more tightly. Applying the Helios principle in these interactions means seeking empathy first, understanding what the other person is feeling, validating their point of view, and then presenting your own from a calm and constructive position. For example, if someone refuses to try a new idea, instead of insisting with, "You don't understand, this is the best," you might ask, "What concerns you about this option? What would you need to feel comfortable with the change?" This simple openness can dissolve resistance because it shows your goal is not to impose but to build something together. The power of gentle persuasion does not mean being weak or avoiding necessary confrontations. It means using the right strategy to achieve a more solid and sustainable outcome. Being the sun involves projecting confidence, warmth, and clarity. Warmth is expressed in how we treat the other person, with respect, patience, and active listening. Confidence is conveyed through our posture, tone of voice, and clarity of ideas, because being kind does not mean being insecure. And clarity is essential. It's not enough to be nice if our message is vague or contradictory. A current example can be seen in the world of digital sales. Many ads on social media still follow the Boreas style, aggressive messages like, "Buy now or you'll miss this opportunity forever." This type of communication creates rejection because the audience perceives the pressure as a threat to their freedom of choice. The most successful brands, however, apply the Helios style. They offer valuable free content, educate the customer, show real success stories, and create a buying experience based on trust. Instead of forcing, they create conditions so appealing that the customer chooses to move forward on their own. Applying the principle of being the sun also has an internal dimension, our own mindset. Many people try to persuade from a place of anxiety or desperation, as if their entire worth depended on convincing the other person. That energy is palpable and breeds resistance. Being the sun means first cultivating our own calm and confidence. When we approach someone with genuine helpfulness and without anxiety about the outcome, we project emotional security, making it easier for the other person to relax and listen to us. How can this be done in practice? First, identify the real objective. What do you want to achieve, and why is it also important for the other person? Second, create the right environment. It could be a comfortable physical space, the right emotional moment, or a conversation that begins with empathy. Third, use language that invites rather than pressures. Phrases like, "What do you think about?" "Would you like to consider this option?" or "How do you see it?" are far more persuasive than "you have to do it" or "there's no other choice." Finally, present the benefits clearly and allow the other person the freedom to decide. Being the son doesn't mean you will always get a yes, but it does ensure that even when the other person says no, the relationship remains intact. This is vital in a world where relationships are the most valuable resource. If someone rejects your proposal but leaves with the feeling of having been respected and heard, they are far more likely to consider it in the future or recommend you to others. Ultimately, the fable of Boreas and Helios reminds us that force can generate temporary compliance, but warmth and understanding produce lasting change. In your daily life, whenever you face a challenging conversation, ask yourself, am I acting like the north wind or like the sun? That single reflection can completely transform your approach and your results, allowing you to influence in a more ethical, effective, and human way. Chapter number 12. Personal Action Plan. Learning about persuasion is valuable, but without a personal action plan, it remains in the category of interesting theory. The true power of this knowledge emerges when you apply it immediately, consciously, and measurably. Persuasion is not a talent reserved for a select few. It is a skill developed through practice, consistency, and reflection. Creating a personal action plan will allow you to turn every concept you've learned into a living, effective tool that impacts your daily life, your work, your relationships, and your personal growth. The first step in applying what you've learned is to set a clear intention. Ask yourself, in which area of your life do you want to see immediate results using persuasion? It could be in your workplace, to improve communication with your team or clients, in your personal relationships, to have more constructive conversations, or even in your digital presence, to generate a positive influence on social media. By defining your goal, you turn your learning into a tangible purpose and avoid scattering your efforts by trying to do everything at once. A clear goal might be, I want to improve my ability to listen and reach constructive agreements with my team over the next 4 weeks. The next step is to incorporate daily exercises in conscious persuasion. These exercises do not require big stages or complex situations. In fact, persuasion is best practiced in small, everyday moments. For example, spend 5 minutes each morning planning one conversation of the day in which you will apply a learned technique. This could be using positive language, practicing active listening, reframing an objection, or incorporating a strategic pause. Choose just one technique per day and apply it deliberately. Then, reflect on the outcome. What worked? What reactions did you notice in the other person? How did you feel using it? One powerful exercise is the positive mirroring technique. During a conversation, instead of responding immediately, make a conscious effort to reflect the other person's point of view before giving your own. For example, if someone expresses concern about a project, instead of replying with direct arguments, say, I understand why that might worry you, since it means more workload. Would you like us to look at how we can redistribute tasks to balance it out? This simple gesture not only reduces resistance but also builds an atmosphere of collaboration. Practicing it every day, even in casual conversations, reinforces your ability to connect and build trust. Another daily exercise is training your observation of nonverbal language. Every interaction is an opportunity to read gestures, postures, and micro-expressions. At the end of the day, briefly write down what you noticed. Did someone cross their arms during a proposal? Did you hear a change in tone when you mentioned a sensitive point? Was there a sigh of relief when your suggestion was accepted? Regularly analyzing these details sharpens your ability to detect emotional signals that most people overlook, and these signals are essential for effective persuasion. Voice modulation should also be practiced consciously. Spend a few minutes recording yourself presenting an argument or telling a story. Then listen back. Does your tone convey confidence? Are there strategic pauses that emphasize key ideas? Is your pace too fast, creating anxiety, or too slow, causing disengagement? Adjusting your voice makes you a more persuasive communicator, and this can even be practiced by reading aloud for a few minutes each day. Beyond practical exercises, it's essential to establish tools for measuring your progress. What isn't measured can't be improved, and persuasion is no exception. A simple tool is an interaction journal, where you record 3 things: the situation, the technique used, and the outcome. For example, meeting with client. Use storytelling to present proposal. Result: client requested more information with interest and scheduled a follow-up meeting. After several weeks, you'll be able to identify patterns. Which techniques work best for you, in which contexts you feel most confident, and where you need to reinforce your skills. Another way to measure progress is to ask for direct feedback. Ask trusted people, "How do you perceive my communication lately? Have you noticed any changes in how I present ideas or listen to others?" Often, internal improvements aren't obvious to ourselves, but are noticeable to those who interact with us regularly. That external feedback acts as a mirror, helping you adjust your style and solidify improvements. You can also use digital tools to support you. There are habit tracking apps like Habitica or Notion where you can create a record of your daily practices. For example, today I practiced active listening. Today I used strategic pauses. Today I reframed an objection without confrontation. Seeing your progress accumulate week after week builds motivation and reinforces your commitment to growth. A key element of this action plan is the mindset of continuous learning. Don't expect immediate perfection or drastic results in just a few days. Persuasion is like a muscle. It strengthens with regular, deliberate use. Even mistakes are part of the process, because each failed interaction is an opportunity for analysis and improvement. The important thing is to maintain daily practice and the willingness to learn from every experience. Imagine the impact of dedicating just 15 minutes a day for 90 days to conscious persuasion exercises. You would have practiced more than 90 real-life situations, adjusted your language, improved your listening, and refined your nonverbal presence. In 3 months, you wouldn't just have acquired new skills, you would have transformed the way you communicate on a deep level. This is what turns knowledge into real transformation. Finally, set evaluation milestones. For example, at the end of each month, ask yourself, what conversations did I have that were different because of these practices? What results did I achieve that I wouldn't have before? Which technique do I want to strengthen next month? This review allows you to see your evolution not just in skills but also in tangible results. More agreements reached, fewer conflicts, better relationships, and a more influential presence. Creating and following a personal action plan turns the abstract concept of persuasion into a real skill you can use every day. It's not about waiting for the big opportunity to showcase your influence. It's about building it little by little, conversation by conversation, until it becomes part of your natural way of communicating. That way, each interaction stops being random and becomes a conscious opportunity to generate a positive impact. Chapter number 13. High-impact persuasion in today's world. We live in an environment saturated with information. Every day we are bombarded with hundreds of stimuli. Emails, social media notifications, digital ads, visual cues on the streets, and messages competing for our attention. Never before in human history has a person been exposed to such a vast amount of information in such a short period of time. This creates a crucial challenge for anyone who wants to influence. How can you make your message not only reach people, but truly make an impact? Persuasion in this context doesn't rely solely on the content of what we say, but also on how we deliver it and our ability to connect emotionally amid the noise. The first challenge is understanding that information overload generates a psychological phenomenon known as attention fatigue. When the brain is bombarded with multiple stimuli, it becomes selective, automatically filtering out what it doesn't consider relevant or emotionally significant. This means that neutral, impersonal, or overly generic messages tend to vanish from the audience's mind. That's why persuading in today's world requires designing clear, distinctive messages that are emotionally connected to the recipient's real needs. To make your message stand out amidst the noise, it's essential to develop a unique value proposition. This doesn't necessarily mean inventing something entirely new, but rather expressing what you already do or propose in a distinctive way. For example, if you're an entrepreneur offering financial consulting services, it's not enough to say, "I help people manage their finances," because that's a message heard every day. A differentiating message would be, "I teach busy people how to create financial stability using a 15-minute-a-day method." That level of specificity and focus sparks curiosity and creates an immediate connection, because the human brain pays more attention to concrete information than to generic statements. Another key aspect is the power of storytelling in the digital age. People don't remember data as much as they remember stories. A well-told story, even in a world saturated with information, breaks through cognitive barriers because it connects with emotions. For example, instead of saying, "Our product is the fastest on the market," telling the story of a customer who regained hours of free time thanks to that product and spent it with their family creates an emotional and memorable bond. On social media, where the average attention span is just seconds, a short, authentic story can be more persuasive than an ad loaded with statistics. We must also recognize that today's digital world is not only saturated, but hyper-connected. Persuasion is no longer a one-way process where someone delivers a message and the public passively receives it. Now there is constant interaction. Audiences comment, criticize, share, and even modify messages. This is why a fundamental skill is digital listening. This means not just posting content, but also analyzing comments, answering questions, thanking for feedback, and, most importantly, adjusting the message based on what the audience actually needs. A communicator who ignores their community's voice on social media quickly loses credibility, while one who integrates it into their strategy is perceived as trustworthy and approachable. High-impact persuasion also requires a deep understanding of how digital platforms prioritize certain content. Social media algorithms reward interaction, comments, shares, and reactions. Therefore, a persuasive message should not only inform but also be designed to trigger action. This can be achieved through clear calls to action, open-ended questions, and content that invites participation rather than mere observation. For example, instead of a one-way announcement like, "Here are our new products," it's more effective to ask, "Which of these designs do you think best fits your lifestyle, and why?" That invitation to share opinions not only increases interaction but turns the audience into active participants in the communication. In today's information-saturated environment, authenticity is more persuasive than ever. People have become skeptical of overly polished messages that seem unreal. Brands, leaders, and individuals who show vulnerability and humanity create deeper connections. For instance, a leader who shares a personal challenge and how they overcame it connects more than someone who only speaks of successes. The same applies on a personal level. Being honest about your intentions and maintaining consistency between your words and actions builds trust, which is the foundation of all effective persuasion. Another important factor in influencing today is the speed of communication. Trends change in a matter of hours, and a relevant message today can become obsolete tomorrow. This doesn't mean you should chase every digital fad, but you should develop the ability to adapt quickly. For example, if a relevant topic emerges in your industry or in society, and you have something valuable to contribute, doing so at the right time can greatly amplify your message's impact. The key is to prepare a solid communication base that you can quickly adapt when the context requires it. A critical point in the digital era is the strategic use of formats. A message can remain the same, but presented in different formats it creates different impacts. An article, a short video, a podcast, or an infographic can each attract different audience segments. Knowing your target audience's preferred format greatly increases your ability to influence. For example, if your audience spends more time on video platforms like YouTube or TikTok, creating short, dynamic, visually engaging content with a strong opening hook will have a greater impact than a long text post on a blog. However, information saturation also has a positive side. It filters out those who are inconsistent. In an environment where anyone can publish a message, those who consistently deliver value, maintain ethical communication, and build trust over time automatically stand out. That's why your goal should not be only to capture momentary attention, but to build a reputation for credibility. This is achieved by being consistent over time, offering real solutions, and avoiding manipulative practices that may yield quick results but damage future trust. Ultimately, high-impact persuasion in today's world is a combination of clarity, emotion, and purpose. Clarity, because confusing messages get lost in the noise. Emotion, because what doesn't trigger an emotional response goes unnoticed. And purpose, because people connect with those who have a cause greater than themselves. In a world with too many voices, yours can stand out if it carries a genuine why that resonates with your audience's values and aspirations. Being persuasive today is not about speaking louder, but about speaking more meaningfully. It's not about reaching more people at any cost, but about deeply connecting with the right people. It's not about competing with the noise, but about differentiating yourself with authenticity and humanity. And those who manage to do so will not only influence others' immediate decisions, but also build long-term relationships based on trust, respect, and admiration. Conclusion: your new reality with persuasion and influence. At this point, you have traveled a profound and transformative journey. You have not only acquired tools and techniques, but you have also awakened a new awareness of your own power to influence. And that power, when used wisely, can change your life in ways you may not even imagine today. Persuasion is not about controlling others or imposing your will. It's about opening doors, building bridges, and creating agreements that elevate everyone involved. The ability to connect with both the mind and the heart of others is one of the most valuable gifts you can develop, and the fact that you're here right now proves that you are already taking a different step than most. You are choosing to influence with responsibility, with ethics, and with a vision greater than your immediate gain. Take a moment to think about everything you can now do. You have the ability to start difficult conversations without fear, to inspire others to see opportunities where they once saw only obstacles, and to motivate people to take action without feeling forced. You can walk into a meeting with confidence, knowing that your words will carry more weight because they are backed by genuine listening, congruent body language, and deep respect for the person in front of you. You now understand that persuading is not about speaking louder or throwing more facts, but about connecting first with emotions and then with logic. That the true art of influence lies in empathy, recognizing what the other person needs and showing a path where both can win. This knowledge also carries a commitment. Having the power to influence means having a direct impact on others' decisions, emotions, and outcomes. And here is the key difference between manipulation and persuasion. Manipulation seeks one's own benefit at the expense of the other, while authentic persuasion creates value for both. That's why your challenge is not only to apply what you've learned, but to do so with integrity. Ask yourself each time, am I seeking the other person's good as much as my own? Am I creating a result where both of us feel we've won? If the answer is yes, then you are not just influencing, you are leading. From now on, your reality changes because your interactions will never be the same. You will have more clarity when communicating, more confidence when presenting your ideas, and more ability to handle conflicts with emotional intelligence. Where there used to be tense discussions, there will now be constructive dialogues. Where there used to be closed doors, opportunities will now open. Because authentic influence builds trust, and trust is the foundation of all personal and professional growth. But here comes the most important challenge, turning this knowledge into a daily habit. Persuasion, like any other skill, strengthens with practice. It's not enough to have heard these ideas once. You need to bring them into your real life, conversation after conversation, interaction after interaction. That means observing yourself every day. How am I using my voice? Am I truly listening? Am I creating an environment where people feel free to make their own decisions? It also means daring to make mistakes, because there will be moments when you won't get the expected result, but each experience will be a lesson that makes you stronger. Here is the challenge I propose. For the next 30 days, choose one daily interaction in which you will consciously apply at least one persuasion technique you've learned here. It could be with a coworker, a friend, your partner, or even a client. Do it with the clear intention of generating value and better understanding the other person. At the end of each day, reflect, what did I learn from this interaction? How did the other person respond? What can I improve tomorrow? If you do this for 30 days, you will not only see results in your surroundings, you will feel a deep internal change. More confidence, more certainty, and more clarity in your communication. I also invite you to become a multiplier of positive influence. Share what you've learned with others, not necessarily by formally teaching techniques, but by modeling through your example. When people see how you achieve results with respect, empathy, and clarity, they will want to do the same. In this way, your ability to persuade benefits not only you, but also creates an impact that expands to your community, your work team, and your family. The world needs more people who can influence without manipulating, lead without imposing, and inspire without pressuring. And you can be one of them. You have acquired a quiet yet transformative power, the power to create new realities through your words, your gestures, your presence, and your intention. Use it wisely, because in every interaction you have the chance to improve someone's life, open a closed door, or change the course of an important decision. As we close this journey, your challenge is not to memorize everything you've heard, but to live it. To be, every day, a little more aware of your impact, a little more intentional in your conversations, and a little braver in using your voice. Because in the end, persuasion and influence are not external techniques. They are an extension of who you are and what you stand for. If your purpose is clear, your ethics are firm, and your desire to serve is genuine, You will find that the world responds, that people trust you, and that your goals stop being just dreams and become achievable realities. The final question is, what will you do with this power you now have? Because true transformation is not in hearing these words, it's in putting them into action today. Not tomorrow, not when you have time, but now. Step into the world with the certainty that you can create more constructive conversations, smarter decisions, and deeper relationships. You have the ability to become a leader in your own environment, regardless of your title, your experience, or your current position. This is your new reality, a life where your words carry weight, where your gestures transmit trust, and where your actions inspire others to move forward with you. A life where influencing is not an occasional act, but an everyday habit. And when that happens, it's not only you who changes, it's the entire environment around you. So take this knowledge, apply it with intention, and watch your world begin to open in ways that once seemed impossible. That is the true power of persuasion and influence. And now, it's in your hands. So, if this audiobook has inspired you and you're ready to go deeper into your personal growth and inner transformation, I invite you to discover another eye-opening audiobook that will change the way you see the world, your decisions, and your potential. Click now, and I'll see you there.